Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Youth Pastors Podcast. There's a lot of people that resource youth ministries. We develop youth pastors. We're all about the youth pastor and developing you, answering your questions, whether you're 21 and new in the game or you're a veteran 41-year-old and you're trying to figure out how to stay fresh, stay moving. We're here for you. My name is John, and this is my youth pastor growing up. I am my first boss in ministry here at Thor Balsitas, and we're pumped to be here with you today.
Awesome. All right, what are we diving into? I know you assembled a bunch of questions from people. They threw them into our the broadcast channel you got on Instagram, and so I think we are going to pick through and kind of dive into some of that content. So, I don't know if you found a way to pull those up, or I'll just let you call out questions, and maybe we can
Oh, sweet.
just go back
You
and
were so
forth. And
excited about some of them. I feel like you have a couple that you know you wanna
oh,
talk
I
about.
I didn't even read through them thoroughly.
Okay.
I didn't know how many there were, and I opened it right before this, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many questions.
Well, this first one is definitely right up your alley, more than almost anyone that I know. And if you are watching this back on YouTube, or if you're watching it live on Twitch and you don't know, we have a broadcast channel on my Instagram, John W. Rush, for the youth, for youth pastors. This is from Ronnie Holmes. He says, excuse me, I had a Chick-fil-A breakfast burp. Ronnie Holmes says, any tips on building a student leadership team for middle school ministry? We currently just have high schoolers who do it.
Yeah, my initial go-to, it would make that leadership team heavily active. So make it serving based, give responsibilities to kids. I also think it's great to just teach some core principles of leadership to middle school students, which typically comes with the onus of responsibility. This is twofold, and it's a lot of fun because the more responsibility you give to a middle school student, the more ownership typically they take on. Now, it doesn't mean that they're the only ones who do this one thing. It's their responsibility. No other kid can help. If you have enough, hey, you get to build a rotation, which might take practice for you. But I think getting them actively involved and serving already sets them apart from the rest of the room. And so instead of just trying to put together a quote unquote leadership title team where maybe they meet once a week and you're going over like a in-depth Bible study, like I think they're probably looking for leadership opportunities to be doing things that other kids aren't doing. With that, do those kids show up a little bit early? Do they stay a little bit later to help set up, to help maybe clean up, tear down? And in those moments, are they bumping shoulders with other leaders? Is your volunteer that's maybe over your tech, do they have 3, 4 middle school students that they are developing along the way? Hey, here's the main thing we're doing tonight. Here's what we're talking about. Here's this 5-minute teaching lesson while setting this stuff up. Like there's just some really ways and niche, minute ways to be growing them at an individual level that I think will prepare them for more of a team leadership as they get a little older.
Yeah, I think you really trained me to see middle schoolers the same as high school, where I feel like the majority of the student ministry world, at least in America, still sees them as like the weirdo, the mutant, like there's so many questions about like what do we do with middle schoolers? What do we do with middle schoolers? And and you just always taught me to treat them like normal people. And um made me think when you're talking that stuff, I think it starts with our mindset of like, stop thinking that because they're in sixth, seventh, or eighth grade that they're any less qualified than a ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th grader. I mean, I've been doing this 15 years. Garrett's been doing it longer. I admit a lot of seventh graders I would choose to go into battle with over a lot of seniors.
Yeah, I think when you're young and you're in, middle school age, you don't typically think through things enough, which means you're not overthinking things. The more that metacognition has set in and we're having these internal conversations and now those are mixing with insecurities. As you get into more of a high school level, they think through a little bit more and they overthink things a little too much. Whereas middle schools, they kind of just go headstrong right into it. So, great question, Payson. What's an example of responsibility you could give to middle school students? Dude, I mean, literally, we had middle school students that would run our tech. They would literally, my one of my closest people to me now started as a middle school student, and he really desired to learn how to edit videos. And I was like, sounds great. Spend time with me. I taught him how to edit videos. He became the main video editor. He now works from home. He's a dad of a couple kids, and he's still editing to this day because he just took it, applied it, built a skill set that was super beneficial, and now raises his family off of that same skill set that he learned in church.
Well,
So I think
and
there's a
before he was now he works with a lot of big corporate clients. Leaving our youth ministry, he got his first job was at Elevation Church,
yeah.
and then New Spring. Like, he was some of the most sought after, uh, just by being trained by Garrett and being given the opportunity, to do it.
Yeah, and I'll give you this example too. I know there's more questions rolling in here, but there is, a massive difference. If you have ever hung out with an older high school student, and then you got to text them a couple days later, or it's kind of like a lot of this versus if you take a sixth grade student out to lunch, they're like on cloud nine for sometimes weeks, if not months. Like it's crazy. And I think a lot of people think that middle school takes more work, they're more energy, they're crazy. But I think those are people who don't know how to invest properly. It's not that you have to take the same middle school student out to lunch every single week. It's you have to figure out what fills them and what energizes them, and then make sure those tanks are full. So they might not need one-on-one time all so often, but how do you check in when you say, "Hey, on Sunday morning at church or at youth," at checking in responsibilities and challenging them with a little bit of giving them just a little bit of authority in something. Students of all ages go crazy with a little bit of authority because they want to exercise it over everybody, which is why I'd make it less about a title and more about actual responsibility and tangible things. Does your church have to set up pipe and drape? Do they have to take out trash? Are there things that they're cleaning or a game that they can help come up with and run and operate? Are there some photos or a social media account they can capture stuff for? Like it's just literally passing some responsibility. And I would say if you are a youth pastor and you can't think of responsibilities to pass off, then we probably need to call a little time out and we need to dream a little bit bigger because that means you're probably doing everything. There's not enough to be doing. So there's probably another whiteboard segment that needs to happen for your ministry of how to scale in order to create more work for the saints to be doing, as that's kind of what your job is as the pastor, is equipping the saints to do the ministry. It's not your job to just do all the ministry. So, yeah, that's probably what I would focus on.
Yeah,
Buying culture, that's great.
yeah, Segapunk has a related question to Payson's, about he says, "My three-year-old wants to help me cut down a stump. She says, Dad, sit and swing, I'll chop. She's not qualified to make progress, but I see her heart to serve." And so, yeah, I don't think, when you think of Star Wars Episode 1, um, Anakin didn't, uh, fly race, in a pod racer, because they were just like, "Dude, like, we should find some, 9-year-old and have him drive this, like, destructive, really fast thing." The only reason they thought to have him do it is because he already had that innate ability, and even when I think, what is it, First Timothy 4 that says, "Do not let people look down on you because you're young?" I think sometimes we just read that at a surface level like, "Oh, see, young people can lead." What Paul was saying is Timothy is a good and qualified leader. Do not let people use the fact that he is young in age as a disqualification for his gift. That verse is less about being young and it's more about being qualified and not letting something like your age. And so I think at the end of the day, I think leadership is not fair. I think that like it's just not fair. I think sports are not fair. Business is not, it's not about fairness. It's about finding people that are putting in the work or have a certain gift and helping them see that that's like that's their job. Or if they have a desire for a gift, giving them the training available to it, like creating steps. So it's like for me, Seg, I'd be like, "Hey, can you build a paper airplane first? Or can you cut, you know, a straight line on a piece of paper? Like I want to help. I want to cut down. I want to uproot the stump with you, but we gotta move. We gotta move towards it." So on one hand, don't take if there's a student that's not gifted in an area, don't over promote them. But I mean, it makes me think of one of our Ians over the years. There is this kid from rural part of our community. I mean, from the time he was in like seventh grade, this other kid, Josh. I mean, the time they were in middle school, they just had this work ethic. They had this swagger. I mean, this kid Ian, because of where he lived, he's driving trucks since the time he's 10. There's things that he was better at than me when he was 12. And so we plugged him into gifts aligned with that. And now what it would inspire other middle schoolers, and what we would not do, and this is really what I mean by the fairness piece, we would not do, "Oh, because Ian gets to operate that machinery, you do too." No, we'd say, "Hey, he's gifted at this, but where do you wanna serve?" And so I think it's about really unlocking people's gift, or developing them, and not writing them off because they're in middle school.
Yeah, and I would say to the stump analogy, right, is my fear is if I say no, how often am I saying no? And what's what's the altercation that follows, right? Because eventually, if my answer is no and I'm not finding a role for you, especially when it comes to parenting, right? It's like my biggest fear is you're gonna stop asking. You're gonna stop coming outside with me. So instead, how do I safely put the axe in your hand and help you swing? Or how do I instead create another role where I go, hey, hold my phone. Can you take video of this so we can show mom? Right? Like how am I keeping them a part of what's happening and creating a role that's designated just for them that they're happy about and they feel like they get to be a contributor? I think people looking to be a contributor is a huge I mean, there's always the old saying of like when people go to church because they want to be needed and they want to be known. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. And so, how are we meeting that need? And it starts in the home. How are you doing that with your kids? How are you doing that with your loved ones? How are you helping them uh, feel like they get to contribute to your household? And if you're not great at that, it's going to be tough to do that on a large scale. So I think it's trying to figure those things out along the way. But
Yeah, Chapel TV, says if, well, the first they said the Phantom Menace reference is fire. Expect a lot of Star Wars from us. Um, this is the way. If culture is I think what they meant is if culture is caught, not just taught, what are some pro tips you have to get middle schoolers to buy into that culture? I'll start just by saying, I think the cardinal sin of modern church in America is we overestimate the announcement time. We're like, "Yeah, the announcements is when that's when I'm gonna recruit people." What ends up happening is like and then I think when we think of culture, we're like, "How do I affect all 200 people or all 50 people?" It's not how you affect culture. I've learned the older I've gotten, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm trying to find the people that I already think are probably on the same wavelength of me and help find a passion and pull them in. And so I'm not gonna go look for donations from someone who has no history of being generous. I'm just not. I'm gonna go, dude, that guy, at our last church, here it is, met him here at Elevation at our last church. That guy was Mr. Tom. I go, Tom is generous. I know Tom. I want to know what small group is seeing, who he's seeing hanging out with. He's probably around some more generous people. I'm gonna ask for summer camp donations from him. But when I stand on stage and I go, "Hi, could you give money for us, please? Here's this video of a sad kid." It's just like, that's why we're not seeing results in culture or anything because we're spending more of our time trying to affect a crowd instead of trying to rally pockets of individuals who already have some of those latent kind of abilities. So for middle schoolers, don't try to change the crowd. Do what Jesus did. Go find your 12, go find your three, go find your one, and make all the others jealous. Garrett used to do this, like, Garrett had this way when we were starting, it's like, there's like this secret society within our youth ministry. Like just these guys that would like bike with Garrett at night. And you like heard about it, and then like you'd see guys like talk about like bikes, and then there was this. I remember in high school, Garrett, I don't even Beach Cruiser. Like, there's this whole brand, and all of a sudden, as this like 17-year-old like buck, I'm working out twice a day. LOL back then. I'm just like full of testosterone, just want to lead everything, and nothing that was ever said from a stage changed how I wanted to become a part of the real culture of our youth ministry. Here it found the few passionate ones and created something that was just so attractional that I was like, and then Garrett had this thing where, then there was like Garrett would do. Now I don't know if you can do this in 2025 anymore. Okay, here's what I'm
oh
gonna tell
god,
you. You can do this in 2025. Just don't post about it, okay? And talk to the dads or the moms about it. You should still do stuff like this. Garrett would have like fight nights at his house. Now the difference is Garrett is actually trained in martial arts, so it was more him teaching us, not us just like hitting each other. But there was just like this elite initiation. So when you came to our youth ministry, which our youth ministry would be anywhere between like 150 to 200, and of a church of around like 200 to 300, like there's some weeks where our youth ministry was the size of the church. So this is like a really big thing that was happening in Celebration Ty. And you come there and you're like, wow, what a great culture. He must have read Craig Shell's guide to having the right language. Yeah, it's all about what's said from stage. It's like, no, he freaking built us and he created something that was so alluring. And so I think that's how you create culture. You start with a few elite people and it snowballs.
Yeah, and applying that directly to use your fist, absolutely. Applying it to the middle school students per se. I think one of my favorite things is literally just ordering a bunch of pizza and hand inviting a select few middle school students that you see as consistent and influential. That it has to be both of those because you're going to meet a lot of influential kids who are not consistent and you can't help them. They won't help you build anything. So, um, but I would normally work with small group leaders and they'd all get to pick, their top 2 boys, top 2 girls, all that kind of stuff that they see as most consistent and most influential. We would invite those kids over just to our house with their leaders and we would feed them, whatever. But then I would know also kind of what the plan was for the year, but now I want their input. And my goal is to ask their input, "Hey, what do you want to see? What do you want to happen at your school? How many kids do you want to see from your school come to you? How can we work together to make that happen? To bring Jesus to where you are and bring them to where Jesus is in hopes that a relationship can begin." But one, I wasn't gonna take complete ownership because it's it's their responsibility. I'm helping them build a ministry that they get to be a part of and utilize, that they get to bring their friends to, that they get to pray with their friends at. This is not just bring your friends to my thing. That can't be a thing. So culture off the bat is what are we doing? And I think I always just try to stem from that knowing that now that we have their ideas, what they'd love to see, they're in when it's time to go. I can call them and challenge them before they even left my house those nights to be like, okay, you're going to help me do this. You're going to help me do this. You're going to help us do this. Like it's just plain and simple. So, um, with those responsibilities, especially when someone thinks it's their idea, they're way more inclined to help carry responsibility and help be a part and build. So, which also built more consistency in those people when they have a role to show up and they view themselves as an influencer taking care of the body, is a big deal.
Yeah, LifeSpring's Youth says, "What had been your most effective discipleship tool and training, and what mistakes did you make when trying to establish it?" And so I think discipleship is how you build culture. I would again, I think one of the I'll say a positive thing, which, we're recording this in February. Um, there's some really cool things happening at Church of the Highlands. It's, like, one of the bigger, if not the biggest church, and to be honest, especially if you follow me, like, I haven't had a lot of great leadership things to say about a lot of the large churches, or I should say discipleship things, um, just because I feel like it's an area of weakness right now. I think creativity is at an all-time high. I think people are crushing it in music, but when it comes to spiritual development and discipleship, I think everyone feels like it's something we're trying to work on, right? And it just seems like at Church of the Highlands, for being a really big church that they are, they're just making some cool changes. Like, they just even the fact that they are so far having a successful transition from lead pastor, and everything like that. But one of the things that they're doing differently this year that I think is so cool, and Garrett, maybe you're probably too busy, but is they're doing a lot more of their one days focused on one
Mm.
topic. So instead of doing like, here's our playbook, their senior pastor realized, he goes, man, if I teach you 2 hours on small groups, you're not going to get the good stuff. Like, we're probably not helping as much as we could. So they're going to devote entire days to entire subjects. And so I think we need to, I think when it comes to culture and discipleship, these are things that none of us have spent as much time thinking about as we think. We spend a lot more time thinking about marketing and like vision words because that's what's kind of been taught. You know what I mean? It's like,
Mm.
what's your 7-word statement on culture? Yeah, man, we all speak the same language. It's like, what the frick? I don't remember anything. I don't like. I don't remember this like phrase Garrett taught us. But guess what? I've got pioneer. Wait, where's the? What am I doing that's wrong with this camera? I got pioneer tattooed to my freaking wrist, which was my senior year summer camp theme. Garrett never told me, "Here you go, guys. You want to be unified. Let's really be unified." Now I gotta put it back in focus. But I think this would be good for YouTube. But it's not zooming back in all the way, Garrett. What did I do wrong? It broke my
I,
camera.
I want to know what you did. Just tap your face.
So I say all that to say we gotta get out of our head, like, culture and discipleship is like anything to do with what we say on stage. I mean, it kind of is, but everything Garrett had just described, discipleship is what happens outside of Wednesday, outside of Sunday, that then trickles into it affects the service. So I think to me, discipleship only comes down to how often are you as a youth pastor spending time outside of church with your leaders and students, and how are you ensuring that your leaders are doing the same? And I don't know if you want to break down how you've done that over the years or the tensions with that, Garrett, and time
Well, I
constraints, all
think,
that.
yeah, I mean, it definitely was probably the hardest lesson I think I learned from our time in Florida, which is where we met you, versus the adjustments I needed to make before we launched our next group in Illinois. Because what I had watched in planning, so I had about a year between the time that I left Florida and actually launched a new ministry with new, systems and a plan and all that. And so I was able to plan a lot and evaluate a lot and use hindsight to try to learn as much as possible from what I did. But in that process, I tried to watch as well. And what I was seeing is that the largest lesson and my largest takeaway from our time in Florida is that I think I enabled too many leaders to have too close of friendships with students and not help them create the dynamic of actual leadership. And what it really did is it created a lot of students' dependency upon their relationships with their leaders versus their dependency built upon their relationship with God. And by pushing for that discipleship time to be at all the things, to do all the things, to be the person that's everywhere for you, this is the person that will take care of you. It taught these students to really care and depend way too much on another human individual that was temporarily probably in their life versus the God that's looking to journey with them and build them and go on that relationship with them. So, um, yeah, I think that was probably the biggest thing that
Well,
I took away from.
and I think that's good. I think it's funny, our church, I would say, youth ministry-wise, yeah, I would say walking away, I think we had inherited you had been raised yeah, and almost too much of a, um, what was the word we used to use? Bi symbiotic? I don't know, it's just like, there would be too much times where, like, we'd hear from our leaders saying, like, "These are my kids." And almost like an unhealthy level of ownership, whereas I
Yeah,
feel like
that was and that was a lot of the conversation. It was about ownership, making sure you have your list, all of those things. And second punk, I see that, and I don't. I definitely would have tried to navigate it differently if obviously if I could go back. But I'm so grateful for that team and those people because they fully bought in and they did their best to own all of it. I didn't lead them well enough in the sense of making sure that they knew that it wasn't them owning it, that it's that they're God's children and it's we're here to help steward alongside of their family and parents. And I think I didn't have the perspective in my own life to lead that category well. And I learned that going before I launched our next group of going, I've got to figure out this dynamic because I'm all about the mentorship. I'm all about leadership. I'm all about being in your life, all of those things. But there needs to be a dynamic between the leader and the student that the leader understands well separation. Because otherwise, if you're not careful, a single young adult will also find a dependency on the amount of fulfillment they receive from students giving them affirmation and thinking they're cool and buying in. So
and then
it's
the
this very much,
35-year-old single person will never go on a date because they're just emotionally gratifying themselves off of what's supposed to be service to God.
while wrestling loneliness at the same time.
Yep.
So
And then I went then to a culture, because when I got to Elevation, we were basically the youth ministry was very brand new. We had just really started small groups in a significant way. We didn't even have Wednesday nights yet. Um, and so then I went to the opposite extreme where I'm like, nobody here gets relational discipleship. It's just not, it's not a thing. And so I feel like it's just funny, like, even my passion that Garrett had to help curb was because of the context I've been in, and so I definitely think that more churches I see lack any form of, like, relational, like, mentorship, than too much, but you definitely don't wanna create, a weird dependency. Codependency, that's what we used to say.
Yeah, and you can always grow your relationship. It's really hard to scale it back.
Yes. Okay. Um, so kind of along those sides of, like, volunteer leadership and relational, Brassfire 365 asks in our youth pastor channel, um, how do you transition less committed adult leaders, volunteers to either another role in the youth ministry or to another service, in your church?
I guess I'm not sure what their role is if you're just gonna transfer to a different role within the same ministry. That seems like a pretty niche question. Also, kind of seems like I'm willing to bet there might just be a personality difference that maybe you're not equipped to lead, if I can say that just direct without any personal stuff attached to it. Um, I think a lot of times if there is an adult with a unique personality that sometimes is a little too much to handle, where can you direct them? Because you'd be amazed how much you could actually probably use them. Because trust me, you're going to have a million middle school students that you don't personally want to hang out with because they drive you insane. That's okay. That doesn't mean they don't need to be ministered to. That doesn't mean they don't need to be loved and guided and discipled. So instead, I think one of my favorite things that I got better at as I got older was being able to walk through a ministry, but also going, man, I see this group of 4 kids. And now I'm going to intentionally try to think about what adult do I need to get in the room that could really reach these 4 specific kids. And I'm going to go get that adult. I'm going to bring them in here. I'm going to ask them for help. Hey, this morning, can you help me? I don't have anyone to help take care of these kids. Can you? I just need 2 things from you. One, can you learn their names? Can you tell them to me after service? Learn their names and learn something about their story. That's it. Make them feel connected when they're here, and that's out. I'm not asking for a commitment. I don't need you to come back next week or next month. Now, I might ask that later based upon how the conversation goes, but that's how I'm getting my adult in the room that I can see pair with these kids. Um, Also, it's because I have a relationship with the adult. I'm just gonna do that without any balancing statement. Don't pick some weird person. Uh, but dude, I hope Chris Dotson listens to this podcast because Chris Dotson had one of the most unique personalities that honestly I feel like I watched forever be difficult for some people to lead. And he's I don't know, he's in his I think he's in his 30s now. Awesome dude. And he was probably one of the most consistent youth leaders I've ever seen throughout my time in youth ministry. And he'd be willing to reach fringe kids that most people aren't willing to start conversations with because they don't know how to connect. And he's just like the most down to earth dude. Terrible jokes. Love you, Chris. But also secretly kind of my favorite thing about you. No matter how bad your jokes were, you're gonna come back and tell me another one next week. I could count on the consistency and uniqueness. It's my job to dictate the energy of where I can help him put it.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I wanna try to pull up a writing tool here because I think what I wanna, tell on myself, um, and what I think I would often do wrong when it came to, basically creating bad situations, within leadership. So much of a bad situation in leadership came from just the fact that I kinda started it, you know, kinda poorly. Let's see if this works, Garrett. Um, so what would happen is I would have big vision, which needed lots of events. Like coming through it all, and yeah, I don't know. Wonder if they can see.
Oh, no, I'm refreshing my stream on my end. I just got to get through this ad. Don't eat Oreos, people.
Hey, subscribe to the channel if you're watching live and you don't wanna see ads. All there you go.
What? I am subscribed, aren't I? But I don't pay for the. Oh, how am I not subscribed? I'm not logged in. What's happening?
Oh, big vision, which needed lots of events, low budget, And um, big vision, let's just be honest, grow attendance, and uh, which meant I needed lots of volunteers. So then what I'd do is I'd run around like a chicken with my head cut off, asking for any adult with a pulse. Onboarding properly took too much time to write the systems, um, and meet with the people. And I changed what I did and how I did it because I moved so fast that the systems didn't matter anyway. Then got an adult I hadn't trained that well and didn't know that well. And then when they didn't perform, I just hoped they quit or got mad and fired them.
I Are you gonna do something like, is this I keep it just looks like a sticky note on my screen. Is that just
I
what this is?
I just typing it out, okay? Maybe it's just an exercise for me to think it through, to focus up on the answer. But what I'm saying is I think more people I don't think we can effectively measure if someone's doing a good or bad enough job unless we first assess how we've been leading them.
Yeah,
What was the onboarding process like? How clear was it? And then when they weren't performing, how many conversations did we have? Matthew 18, which is mostly, about confronting a fellow believer in sin, a secondary, kind of framework is like, if you have a problem with someone, you should at least probably talk to them like 5 times. Try 5 different things. But most of the time we're like, "Yeah, I tried to talk to them," you know, and either we're too soft relationally, like we took them out to coffee, but we never brought up the main situation, or we were super confrontational and we never took them out, for coffee, and that's why they didn't hear it.
yeah, and the leaders that I ended up needing to move are either leaders that cross boundaries lines and don't live up to the expectations that they signed up for, or are the ones that sneak into my room because they say they wanna be a leader, but it turns out it's just a dad who wants to be a chaperone in the back, and that's okay. But what I always tell people is I actually don't have a need for chaperones. You can either be a leader or you can help me be security, but security has, uh, strict stipulations. I'm all about security being kind or whatever, but I don't keep security inside the room. Security is guarding the room. I don't need them to take care of something in the room. They shouldn't be in my room. They need to exit my room and keep the facility safe so that no one enters in my room. Uh, Silly, but that's to me a deal breaker. If some person just wants to stand in there and stand in the back.
Or we would have people, yeah, I really think that I think that you're a relational leader or you're a task-based leader. My relational leaders, I have a lot higher of a standard for, and my task-based ones, the standard is, did you do the job well? And I think just making it clear. And I really encourage youth pastors, stop making people do both because they'll do both poorly.
No, and if you want a metric, this is the metric that I tried really hard to live by, and I still heavily encourage this. Your small group students, when they are somewhat new to your systems, really should be thinking that your small group leaders, that they should be thinking their small group leader is their pastor. Only because they don't know any different, because that's who's guiding them and that's how well your system is working. Now, that can't be making you insecure. That has to be a strong core. But that was always my favorite thing to hear when a mom would be like, "Hey, I'm kind of confused. Their youth pastor, Troy, was, and I'm like, no, Troy's just a small group leader. He works a 9 to 5 job. He's a volunteer. I love it. It's the best. That means Troy's literally taking care of this person, and this person is viewing them as the spiritual guidance, which is awesome.
Yeah. Anything else? I mean, this is a great episode. I think basically we're talking about volunteer culture, relational culture. And that ultimately, I think that's the key to figuring out any of your problems involving middle school ministry. Any final words maybe on middle school ministry that we want to kind of wrap this episode up with, um, and kind of keep it in one stream of consciousness?
Um, hopefully it's an encouraging word, which is I really believe that middle school ministry can be like it can thrive in almost any environment. And typically people are trying to figure out the bare minimum because they're nervous or they don't want to feed the beast. But in reality, it is hands down probably your biggest opportunity to grow a high school group is by growing a solid, strong middle school group, which your solid middle school students are probably the ones that came up through your kids' church experience. They're going to be the most consistent. They're there. They've been there the longest. They're probably going to be the strong core of your group. So I would start and build. But think of it. I mean, it's if it's clay and it's malleable, what can you build? If you are wanting to pastor an awesome high school group, start with middle school today so that you can culture them, build them, shape them, and let them grow into the group you're really desiring for high school.
Yeah, 100%. Um, Separate middle school and high school services or combined?
I think my favorite answer on this is understanding the rhythms of the year. And I think there's times for both. I think there's times they should be in the same room. I think there's times they should obviously be separated. Um, I know that that's tough. Not everyone has the same facility or facility options. Uh, but I'm not going to speak to the niche. I'm going to speak to the heart. So I would definitely aim to figure out on your youth calendar. And if you don't have a youth calendar and know what's happening for the next year, maybe reach out because we can help you do that. And understanding these are the times that we need to get them together because of the cross pollination, how healthy that can be and what can stem from that. But there's also probably a lot of topics and moments, or, you know, we always kept them separated around prom time because we're going to have different conversations around school calendars and things that are happening and big dances and opportunities for people to make choices that they're going to regret. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
That's great. Which prom, and dating and romance, we'll talk about on the next episode. We'll get into some sticky topics. LOL. Um, yeah, I think that's great. I mean, something just getting really practical. One of the guys that I coach, the youth pastor in the UK, and they're just blowing up. Like their youth ministry is just growing. They're like averaging 200, which is big anywhere, but especially big in the UK. And he's like, he was all excited. He's like, man, we're gonna go to the main auditorium, you know, um, and I just go, yeah, dude, all the momentum that you feel from having a packed room, you're just gonna kill it, and then you're gonna have to deal with all the new rules from having to deal with being in the main auditorium on Sunday and cleaning up after it and, all this stuff, and then you're gonna have 200 kids in a room that seats 600, and it's just gonna feel weird, and then your number's gonna go down, and then you're gonna be like, wait, what?" And then you're like, "Do we go back?" And, I think and so what I told him is something that we always joke, Garrett, is like, probably the thing that we wish we would have tried more and, like, almost like the sweet spot, which was the staggered, like, services where we'd essentially like, what I told him to do is essentially we may have done it a little bit different, Garrett, but essentially what I told him is like, "Hey, have middle school come in, rip a funny game, rip a good message, 20, 25 minutes." I mean, shoot, if you wanna go longer and it's good, whatever, you know? Um A and just you'll have their attention right away. Middle schoolers have not seen enough Christian YouTube to know they need to be warmed up with worship before they hear a message. If anything, sometimes I think worship actually attacks their attention span at times of like, um, and then end middle school in worship while you bring the high schoolers in from eating food and playing games outside. Then you have this mega packed room in worship where middle schoolers are cementing the word God spoke to them. High schoolers are starting to get prepped for the word that God spoke to them. And then when worship ends, you send the middle schoolers outside to have fun games, small groups, or whatever. And I think that that's such a cool way to try to keep your middle schoolers and high schoolers around each other without separating them completely. But yeah.
Yeah, I would. Here's where I'll caution some people because It is much harder of a room to control and lead going straight from a game into a message. So it needs to be thought through because it takes effort. But the downside is that in order to not have to navigate a tough room, a lot of groups utilize worship as a cool down period. We get them all hyped, we get them crazy. Then we just play loud music in hopes that it drowns out and everyone falls in place. And then we can dismiss them to their seats. Now they're going to listen to whatever I'm going to yell at them about for the next 25 minutes. So I love that approach. I've always loved that approach, but it's if you're having a hard time leading your room and the energy and not knowing how to use it, and people are talking over you, and you're constantly having to tell people to quiet down, that's great. But I would highly suggest helping in getting some help navigating that in yourself versus, um, yeah, just utilizing something else like worship to as a cool down period. Dude, my chat just came back on, so I have no idea what.
No, it's been good. It's been good in chat.
Okay.
Well, guys, on the live stream and then on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, subscribe here on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram at John W. Rush and at Garrett Thor. Soon we'll have a Instagram page dedicated just to the youth pastors, and it'll be contributed by some other great people, some youth pastors that are in the game in some really interesting places around the world, across the country, different perspectives and backgrounds. And Garrett and I, same heart, is we don't just want to resource youth ministries. We want to build the youth pastor. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Love your face. We'll probably come up with some kind of lightning based um, sign off. But for now, you've been Thunderstruck.